Thank you everyone for joining us today for the event, Solidarity Amidst Environmental Degradation and Environmental Injustice, Part 2. This event is being organized by Sin Fronteras 1312 as part of an event series. And my name is Adri Laurent, and I use she, her pronouns, and I will be your moderator for today's event. This event is being recorded as well, so folks are aware of that too. And before I start with the introduction for this event, I did want to take a moment to ground this event in the lands that I'm currently occupying right now. I'm currently joining you all from the stolen lands of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh peoples, colonially known as Vancouver, Canada. And these host nations have been stewards of this land for time immemorial and have really led the way for environmental justice and for a better future for us all. And from my perspective, an environmental struggle that is not grounded in the land and is not led by Indigenous people is a struggle that lacks depth. And wherever you're joining us from, I really do want to encourage all of the attendees today to learn about the lands that you're currently on, learn about the history of the people who've been on it, and also the demands of the Indigenous people whose lands you are on, and support their work however you are able to do that. And on that note, I did want to give a special shout out to an Indigenous-led group here on the lands that I'm on, the lands of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh, who are doing some really incredible work. They're called Braided Warriors. I'll put the link in the chat. They're a group of Indigenous youth defending the land and the people from capitalist colonial violence. They have faced tremendous violence from the police as they defend the land from extractivism. And to me, I think this really highlights how policing and carceral systems have no place in a world that puts the people and the land first. And these oppressive systems and institutions really operate on a global level and are replicated all over the world. So I will put their link in the chat so you can check out some of their work. But I definitely want to encourage folks to reflect on the lands that you are occupying today and how you can support Indigenous people there. And to me, also as a mixed race immigrant settler from Honduras with both Black and European ancestry, my relationship to this land has evolved a lot as I organize more deeply for collective liberation. And through my organizing, I've also learned about my own responsibility in caring for these lands and the lands that I call home back in Honduras as well. I've learned to see the connections between the struggle that the Garifuna people and the Lenca people in Honduras are facing, as well as the connections between the Indigenous people of so-called British Columbia. We can see Indigenous people in Honduras fighting against mining companies, including Canadian mining companies. And we also see Indigenous people in so-called BC fighting against pipelines on stolen land. There's an increase in police funding and specialized police units that were created to monitor and oppress Indigenous people in so-called Canada. And we're also seeing an increase in the investment and training of military and police in Central America by US and Canadian forces. And again, I think this just highlights the interconnected nature of these systems of oppression. And again, these systems of oppression are also forcibly displacing people all over the world. They have been displacing people for years now, and this displacement is incredibly violent and has tremendous impact across generations as well. There really is no environmental justice or climate justice without Indigenous sovereignty and Black liberation. Our fight against extractivism and environmental injustices at its core is a fight against white supremacy, against capitalism, against policing, and against imperialism. We really do have to fight against colonial violence and settler colonialism, whether it be in Canada or in Palestine. And we have to fight against police violence, whether it be in the US or in Colombia. If we understand that our struggles are connected, we must also understand that our liberation is connected as well. And during this event, we really hope to unpack some of these complex themes with our amazing speakers today. I'll introduce them a little bit later. These are issues that are really expansive and require ongoing learning. But we hope that this event can offer attendees a glimpse into the important work that some of these Black and Indigenous leaders who are fighting against these systems of oppression and fighting for environmental justice for all. We really hope to draw out the connected nature of these struggles while also highlighting the unique ways that these issues are felt by communities and also the unique ways that they are fighting back, and how we can stand in solidarity with them no matter where we are. The speakers that we have today will touch on their understanding of environmental injustice and what land back means to them from their own work and their own experiences. Today, we will be hearing from Carla Garcia, Kanahus Manuel, Pluma Moreno, and Jordi. I'll introduce them all one by one before they speak. And once the last speaker is finished, we'll open up a Q&A session. It'll be loosely facilitated and hoping to be more of a conversation. We'll be monitoring the chat to see if folks have any questions for our speakers. And when we finish the event, the speakers will also have a couple of minutes at the end to share their thoughts and parting words as well. And I'll wrap up with some closing remarks at the very end as well. And first up, our first speaker is Carla Garcia. So I will introduce Carla. I see the face of surprise you've got. I will introduce Carla first. So we'll be hearing from her. She's the International Relations Coordinator at OFRANEH, which is the Fraternal Black Organization of Honduras, which focuses on the cultural and territorial defense of the Garifuna people as a form of survival. She works with the Garifuna people in New York and Central America. And with that said, Carla, to you.
Thank you, Adri. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure. I'm very, very happy to be here this afternoon. Right now in New York, it's 7 p.m. And as Adri says, I'm part of the Garifuna community, and we have a lot of in common with the Indigenous community because we are Garifuna and Indigenous as one. Our mother is from the Indigenous communities, and our father is coming from Africa. So we have a culture that knows that the land is the first thing that you need to survive and to raise your community and your next generations. Unfortunately, our people, our father was translated, it came from Africa in that not better way. And in St. Vincent, in front of the coast of Venezuela, they found a place to live. And they lived there with, and they created the Garifuna community. And they were using the land, they were using everything that the Mother Nature gave us, but in the way that the Indigenous and Black communities do, taking exactly what we need and giving away or giving back to the community, to the land, to the Mother Nature, what the Mother Nature needs to continue providing to us. In some point of our history, the British colony came to claim the land of St. Vincent. And there was a war for 7 years, and we lost the war. And portion of our community was exiled from their land to Honduras. So this is the way that we arrived to Honduras. And now we are facing a third exile from our land. So now we are already in place doing what our ancestors show us or teach us to do, and we are now facing the same situation. And in this story, the Garifuna story, as in the stories of majority of the population, and I'm not talking about just the Indigenous and Black communities, because if we saw what is happening around the immigration situation, is part of the same. We have these people who believe they are powerful, They believe that they have everything. They believe that they are in charge to manage the world. What has happened with them? They don't know how to live with our mother nature. So now we have this organization. There's in Honduras, there's a lot of Black-based organizations, but OFRANEH is in charge to defend the land where the Garifuna community is living. We have 57 Garifuna communities in the Atlantic coast of Honduras. And all our communities are now in danger to disappear for these big projects. I'm going to say that, big projects to make better the world, apparently. But if you know that you need a tree to produce oxygen, why are you going to cut the tree? If you know that you need the sea to produce the fish and all the good things that we get from the sea, why are you going to put in danger the life of the sea? If you know that you need the land to grow your food, why are you going to avoid to use the land? Or are you going to give to the land a different work that it's supposed to do? This is what is happening in the world. Everything that is supposed to go in one way is moving in a different way because somebody thinks that they are more than the land, more than the sea, more than the mother nature, and more than the life of the people. This is, for me, in my conception, the real problem that we have here. In our ancestral education, when we born, we start living and respecting the land and the mother nature. And we grow and we learn along of our life how to live with the mother nature. That means for other people that we are ignorant. We know nothing about the world. We know nothing about modernity. We know nothing about anything. But you saw in United Nations, people reunited to try to avoid more climate changes. We have the answers. It's there. And we don't sell the answers. We give the answers to everyone, because if we take care of a river in the middle of the mountains in Honduras, this river will produce water for everyone. If we are taking care of the trees, it's because the world, not only where we live, not only our space, the world needs the oxygen that those trees will produce. If we are taking care of the small plants, it's because they are medicine. People is struggling right now, trying to find a solution for the COVID-19, for example. But if you go to the Indigenous and Black communities, they have a solution. They are not struggling with a vaccine. Why the powerful people don't go and learn with us? Because we are the ignorance. But the ignorance is the people who is trying to save the world. And that's why we are here now, right? Trying to talk about what is our vision, our perspective. Let me tell you, in the Garifuna community, since 2019 to now, we have more than 50 people killed because they were defending the land. We are working right now trying to know what happened with 5 of our young men in one of the Garifuna communities, Triunfo de la Cruz, because they were kidnapped by the police and they disappear. So next week will be 8 months of this disappearance. No information from the government, no investigation from the police. But if you go in group as a community to claim some answers, some response, they will treat you as what is the word that they are using right now? I want to use the exactly word, terrorist. So now we are the bad people. If we come in group and raise our voices to say, hey, this is not correct, we are the terrorists of the world. And what happened when we call them terrorists? They do what is happening in Canada. They gave to the police a lot of resources to kill us. So what the world needs? The world is need for equality. COVID-19 show us that if we let the earth a moment to breathe, the earth will continue giving us what we need. This is our home, earth. So who is the terrorist right now? Who is the power that is killing not only the earth, is killing everything that lives in the earth? The money? Maybe. I'm going to leave this question for everyone. Do you think that people is coming through the borders from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras just because the problem of the violence is raising back there? And you believe that the border in the United States is open because they want to help these people? This is maybe a problem that we need to look closely. We need to focus on that, because there's a project named North Triangle. People who live in the United States can see now in the news when a journalist talk about Honduras, he said one of the countries of the North Triangle. What is North Triangle? North Triangle is a place, 3 countries that will give the land to the capital, to the power to be developed, to say something. And all the people who is coming through the border are coming from the land that is supposed to give now, maybe 2021 or 2022, to this power, to this money. So if our people from land inside is living the land, we are putting more in danger the mother nature, because this is the people who live in common union with the land. And for that, because of these people, we still having oxygen, clean water, etc., etc. I'm going to leave my small presentation right here saying this. We are important, but we need to give to the land and to everything that is around us a balance. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Carla. Muchísimas gracias de todo corazón. To me, there's a couple of things that really stood out from what you said. I think the point that you made on the land being the first thing that we need to survive, and how reciprocity is a core part of that. We give and we take. And I think that's such an important thing to consider with our relationship with land, but with other people as well. So thank you for highlighting that, and just highlighting the fact that right now capitalist development is being put at a higher value than human life and life on Earth as a whole. And you're absolutely right. I think that's the core part of the problem that we're addressing right now. And yeah, there's so many things happening in Honduras as well that are so important to highlight. And for folks who didn't know about the 5 Garifuna men who are still missing, who were kidnapped, I put a link in the chat by an article that was written by a Garifuna leader as well. So take a look at that if you weren't aware of that. So thank you again so much, Carla. I really appreciate your words. Next up, we've got Kanahus Manuel from the I'm going to try to pronounce this correctly, Secwepemc and Ktunaxa Nations in the interior of so-called BC. She's a leader in Tiny House Warriors, Our Land is Home, and their mission is to stop the TMX pipeline from crossing unceded territories. And Kanahus, I will pass it to you now. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Quite. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for all the warriors that are on this panel. I was touched by your words, Carla, and so I'm just going to, start my talk out to connect with your words. But I'm calling right now from a tiny house that's blocking the Trans Mountain man camp, and we're successful in stopping 1,000 man camp. The pipeline workers, they wanted to house 1,000 of them right here. And so we've been here for 3 winters, and the snow just barely melted here in the mountains. But I just wanted to, connect with all of you. I just see here like your Garifuna. I feel like I'm connected to everyone on this panel, and also to my Boriken sister. I have 4 children. I'm a mother of 4, and I have 4 children that father is Taino Arawak, so I feel connected to you as well. And like I said, for 4 children, and they're freedom babies, and I chose not to register all 4 of them until recently, when my 18-year-old wanted to register himself to get his documents so he could travel and passport, all of this stuff. But I'm also a tattoo artist and a traditional birth keeper and a freedom fighter, and always advocating for people that are locked up. And my connection to the border is that my children, because they weren't documented, they traveled without any type of colonial identification. And 2 years ago, they were stopped at the border near the border of Guatemala. They were in Guatemala with the Mayan people there for a whole month, weaving and learning different trainings with the Mayan people in our school. It's called the Indigenous Life School program that brought them down there. And they were detained for 14 days at Mexico's largest immigration detention center in Tapachula, Mexico, and Chiapas. And so for 14 days they were there, and I was trying to get them. And anyways, they end up being deported to San Diego with me in the same flight and everything. But I feel really attached to the border issue as Indigenous people. I feel that these colonial borders are, illegal all the way through. And even crossing the border just recently, because I was down with people that are actually Garifuna in Belize, and just got back just very recently. And I had to do a 14-day quarantine, and this whole thing with going through the border. But the diplomats, a part of the Canadian government, or diplomats a part of any of these so-called nation states, they don't have to quarantine. So that, I just wanted to mention that. We're fighting against the Trans Mountain Pipeline. This is a 1,152 kilometer pipeline coming from the Alberta tar sands in Edmonton. They want to mine an area the size of Texas, and this crude oil, or this heavy, probably one of the most toxic substance, bitumen, that they want to pipe through these pipes, and they want to dilute it, that they call the dilbit. And the consistency is like the consistency of peanut butter. They dilute it so it could be flow with the consistency of like honey when it's heated through the pipes all throughout. And we come from mountains, hence the name of the pipeline, Trans Mountain Pipeline. In our territory, we're Secwepemc. We come from our nation, Secwepemc Uluf, which is known as the spilling waters. So it comes from all the glaciers that have continued to melt and make our creeks and streams since the beginning of time. Like, since the receding of our glaciers, we found mammoth tusks carved by our people, and we're linked to this land. My grandfather, late Grand Chief George Manuel, would always say to the people, to all of us, that our culture and our language, it flows from the land. And not to confuse, you know, our fight. It's always about land and self-determination and our Indigenous sovereignty. And by building tiny houses on wheels right now, with the tiny house warriors, we're able to like build these structures and get on the front line off the Indian Reserve. And just so people know, if you add up all the Indian reserves, these federally imposed Indian reserves in Canada, you add that land base all up, it'll equal 0.2%. So not even 1% of land base. And so that's what we're saying when we say land back. We're saying we're leaving the Indian reserves, these concentration camps that the federal government and the Crown made and enforced us to live under and live in, and leave these concentration camps and go take back land and live and occupy and assert our rights and our title to our lands off reserve onto the remaining part of our territory. And in this case, doing it to stop a massive pipeline that the Crown is pushing through. And here in Canada too, it was colonized by Great Britain and the Crown, and they signed treaties with the Crown all the way from the Atlantic coast, all throughout coming towards the Rocky Mountains on the West Coast, but they stopped making treaties. And so everything pretty well west of the Rocky Mountains, unceded and unsurrendered. We have no treaties with Great Britain or Canada or British Columbia, or no formal land agreement. So we're in a very rare situation here in Canada, and a very powerful situation because we're standing on our unceded lands. We're dealing with Canadian mining companies too, just being in the heart of this, you know, destruction hub of Canadian mining companies. And so, you know, we stand in solidarity. And I think that's another way that we can continue to do work with our relatives in the South, is continue to target these mining companies at the headquarters in Toronto and Vancouver and other major cities here in so-called Canada. We've, and me personally, have a really a real hate towards mining, because I had to witness firsthand one of the world's, or North America's, largest mine disasters with the Mount Polley mine disaster that just unleashed, and you know, billions of gallons of toxic mine waste and tailings impoundment, that earthen dam that breached in August 4th of 2014. And every 4 years we have the salmon that return to spawn in the inland. So they go out to the ocean and spend their years in the ocean, Pacific Ocean, and then they come back in to the interior, to all these rivers that are so very important to us. So we're all salmon people, whether you're living on the coast of so-called British Columbia, or whether you're in the interior. We depend on salmon. We say it's in our DNA. It flows through our same DNA that flows through the salmon, flows through our blood. You know, shout out to Braided Warriors. A lot of those youth have been here with Tiny House Warriors and have been, you know, building up all of their skills as youth. And, you know, I want to say, like, you know, Braided Warriors and our youth movements, whether they're here or anywhere else in the world, our Indigenous youth movements are very important to support and to continue to fund. They don't get mainstream funding like other organizations, so continue to fund them. I know braidedwarriors@gmail.com, they're always accepting EMTs and or e-transfers or PayPals. And we believe in fighting from a local to an international level. So we're bringing our fight over to Europe, over to the United Nations, over to these big financial institutions, insurance companies, and international banks, to, you know, call on them to defund and divest out of Alberta tar sands and any type of pipeline infrastructure here in so-called Canada. We stand in solidarity with the Palestinian and the Indigenous people and the people of Colombia that are standing and fighting up against these same colonial states and systems that we're facing, you know, from the north to the south, you know, internationally, global. We stand in solidarity for our collective liberation. We know our freedom is bound with each other. And we have my travels that I'm just recently back from was traveling with a month-long tour with the Rainbow Coalition and with Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. from the Black Panther Party Cubs. They just released a movie called Judas and the Black Messiah, a mainstream movie that just got a lot of nominations and awards about the Black Panther Party and the assassination of Chairman Fred Hampton back in December 4th, 1969. And we're very linked to this as well, the same state and the same enemy that came and assassinated Chairman Fred is the same enemy in state that we're battling still today. He was assassinated 2 weeks after returning from a tour in Canada. And, you know, Malcolm X also was assassinated after returning from a tour from Canada as well. So I believe that, you know, they fear the unity that comes with Black and Indigenous and African Indigenous peoples. And so we know that it's working. We know that these connections that we're making is very powerful, and it's going to change. There's going to be major shifts in the way that the world operates because of the way that we're coming together, especially attacking financial institutions and talking about building our own economic solutions and building our own economies and trade that we had prior to white man coming to our shores. So again, just sign off. I know eager to listen to everybody else speak and continue to work and build with everybody on this panel, Cook's Jam.
Thank you so much for those words as well, Kanahus. I was diligently taking notes as you were speaking, trying to capture all the brilliance of your words. I think one of the things to me that really stood out from what you were talking about is border imperialism. It's something that you mentioned at the very beginning. And I know Carla also mentioned it too, and thinking about how border imperialism and carceral systems are so linked to police, and how those are all incredibly violent. And first of all, no one is illegal on stolen land. And I think thank you for mentioning that too. And also for highlighting how the fight really is always about the land and self-determination for people. And for that shout out to Braided Warriors too. One of the things that I think is always so important with this work is financial redistribution whenever is possible. Folks need the support and need funding, and mutual aid is an incredibly powerful way to support these movements if that's something that you're able to do. So I know it's tough times for people, but it is a really important way to move us forward, and in standing in solidarity with people all over the world who are fighting against imperialism, colonialism, and white supremacy. So thank you so much for those words, Kanahus. Really, really, really valuable. And next up, we've got Pluma Barbara Moreno of the CanJibaro-Taino people of Boriken, also known as Puerto Rico. She's a member of the Movimiento Indigena de Borike, who fight for decolonization and territorial defense, vindicating the autonomy of Indigenous people in the Caribbean, denouncing the colonization and US ethnocidal attempt in economic, social, and political violence experienced by the CanJibaro-Taino people. Pluma, I will pass it to you. I think you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with all of you. Thank you for the invitation. My English is not very good. I'll do my best. I really want to do it in English so more people can, so I can bring the narrative to more people. First of all, I'd like to point out that I am the granddaughter of Paula Cardona. She's a herbalist and farmer from Puerto Rico, from the mountains, and I'm a great-granddaughter of Minga Cardona. She's a midwife. She was a midwife. I like to point that out, recognizing where we come from in the way of honoring our land and territory as well. We are the CanJibaro-Taino nation of the island of Boriken, whose colonial name is Puerto Rico. It's very important to know that. That name is imposed by the European invaders to reiterate that it was a port, a rich territory with the capacity of capitalist merchandise, exploitation, and looting, of course. So we like to vindicate our ancestor name. We have been resistant for more than 527 years since the invasion of the Europeans in 1493. And then in 1893, with the Hispano-American Guerra War, when we were passed as a war booty to war booty, is that right to say it? From Spain to United States, in an illegal and illegitimate treaty that was called Tratado de Paris, because we were not legally a territory of Spain. We're still fighting against that, and we're still bringing those issues in the international rights, because that treaty is completely illegal. It is not it's illegitimate. Historically, we are known by many names, as the sister said. We are known as Taino, Arahuacos, CanJibaros, many names, as many other colonial names, many other indigenous names has changed through history with the colonization. We have been inhabited in the Caribbean for more than 10,000 years before Christ. I like to point that too, because I like to make that comparison between 527 years and more than 10,000 years before Christ. So we are people of the earth. We are farmers by nature, as we used to be. That's how we are now as well. Our worldview includes a deep relationship with nature, recognizing is an integral part of our life. We are a water nation defending and invaded and consequently colonized territory. That is, and I like to point this out later so people can understand our situation. Our land and territory are currently under the political jurisdiction and economic power of the US government. That is, we are supposed to have an internal government in theory, right? Because we choose a government, but the truly final decisions are in reality taken by the US Congress. So we don't make decisions in the land. Given these circumstances, describes above, and us being as a nation not recognized, not by the state government or the federal government as indigenous people, as a nation, discriminated, eliminated from all parts of history as a ethnic un grupo étnico extinguido, extincted. We are with, confronting those Eurocentric and Anglocentric misinterpretation, with those false imposition of extermination, ethnocide, and confronting constantly crass racism, of course, and ethnic discrimination, since all our rights are completely anulados. In other words, the illegitimate and the liberal state government that occupies our territory has violated and continue to violate all our rights to determine ourselves, autodeterminarnos, our right to govern, autogobernarnos, and therefore our rights to participate in the political, economic, legal, social decisions, and of course that includes the environmental decisions. Thus, that continually causes, environmental injustices and crimes that endanger our present and future generation in the island. Okay. When I try to explain this, I like to make un paralelismo to understand to understand how we fight against all this environmental injustice. I would like to start talking about the environmental justice. It's talking about the right and the lack at the same time of national and international rights inherent to indigenous peoples of our territory as the native peoples that live and have the right to our land and territory. Colonialism for us is the main issue of this problem, when one of the primary manifestations of colonialism is the exploitation of natural, of mineral resources, destruction of wealth, the looting, as I keep saying that. We are very focusing on denouncing looting, el saqueo, because also as Indigenous people, since we're not recognized, also our ceremonial sites are being constantly destroyed, saqueados, including our ancestors that were resting in those ceremonial and archaeological and sacred sites. And for us, we've been fighting for this for a long time, and it's a long way. We're not even close to have any justice on this, but we keep fighting. And also, when we understand in our land, ¿verdad? In our colonial issues, our culture and environmental goods of our colonized territory are the main focus of all this struggle. For instance, the struggle for decolonization of Puerto Rico and the mobilization of environmental justice cannot be understood independently. For us, fighting for environmental justice is very atado, is very una coyuntura total with the anti-colonial movement. Faced with this, as a process of historical decolonization and in daily practice, we continue resisting this environmental development, and all that is also being expressed as a gentrification by tourist development. And that is very important for us, because as being a colony of the United States, we are constantly, we are in a new space of neocolonization, where we have all foreigners coming and all our sources are put on sale and are disposal for all the rich elite. And we continue resisting that economic and social, also industrial capitalism that allies with the development, with tourist development. There's constantly to point out this constantly in different medios, in different medios. It is said that what is intended is un Puerto Rico sin puertorriqueños, or Puerto Rico without Puerto Ricans. And in short, pointing out this relationship between colonial status, the robbery and territorial looting with the territorial environment violence to which we have been subject on the island, where this colonial geopolitical character only comes important to the extent that the territory has natural resources, has human and extractable minerals, because also we are seen as human resources to work for the tourists, for the foreigner, for the people that come and take our land. Es decir, hay una funcionalidad geopolítica, geopolitical functionality of colonialism. It's subordinate to biopolitics, totalmente. It's subordinate to biopolitics, and the possibilities of enrichment of that development is the destruction completely of life. And that we are a land with many, many resources, water resources, air resources. In the Caribbean, we are the water, somos el corredor de aguas que puede tomarse más grande del Caribe. So, constantly, there is different movimiento, ¿verdad? To displace all the Puerto Ricans, and it's mostly in the rural areas. In the rural areas, there is being constructed constantly the conditions, economical conditions, no work, health conditions, educational conditions, so we can be displaced. And we know, as you know, after we had the Hurricane Maria, a lot of people from Puerto Rico displaced to the United States, and we were completely vulnerable to not being able to recuperar from that, because we were blocked by the Jones Act, we are blocked by not having the help of our sisters and brothers, not only from the diaspora, but also from all over the world of Latin America and the Caribbean. So this is very important when we talk about fronteras, because in Puerto Rico, there has been deployed various mechanisms of repression and criminalization that has been putting the environmental conflicts and anti-colonial struggle since the 60s, where historians they have proved that from the 90s and 2011, with the approval of the Patriot Act, here in Puerto Rico also the attempts to, as Carla was saying, the attempts to defend the land and the territory, it is called ecoterrorism, right? Somehow it's called, if we scream out, we're terrorists. If we don't scream out, we're dead. We don't exist. In Puerto Rico, we don't exist. So it's like, it's very strong. Entonces, as we talk about this biopolitics of nature, the elites force these environmental degradations as a result of their development of policies that include, as I say, industrialization still on, no sé cómo decirlo, una invasión de los terrenos por empresas farmacéuticas.
Oh, pharmaceutical companies?
Sí, we are like a stand laboratory, also for the GMO products, seeds and products, and we have acres and acres of land that has been contaminated with those products to produce seeds as well, and to experiment by DuPont, by Monsanto, and different. We have been mobilizing for that, but it's still there. It is still there. I believe that one of the things that we confront mostly is that colonization, for me, it's so deep and so profound that even before you're born, it points out that you're dead, that you don't exist, and that gives people a struggle in identity to fight for the land and territory. But we have won many wars in that terms. We were able to take out the U.S. military navy from Culebra in 1975, to take out in 2003 from Vieques the Marine Navy forces. And we have anti-mining struggles until 1995. We, in 2009-10, we have another governor that imposed emergency, estado de emergencia, where they tried to bring out a gas pipeline as well. We were able to struggle to fight against that, and it was stopped. We have, they were trying to put a conversion of electric power plants from oil to natural gas as well. And we're still fighting for the Carbonera. Also, there has been the construction of garbage of incineration. That means that we will receive the garbage from other countries and incinerate it here. And that fight is going on still. We have been fighting also for the installation of windmills in areas of high agricultural production, because as I said, we are a farmer community, and it is very important to us to defend the territories from that side. I think that we're past the time, right? So I just keep this page.
Thank you so much, Pluma. I'm still reeling in all the things that you said. There was really so much richness in what you shared with us. So muchísimas gracias también. Lo aprecio muchísimo. And thank you for folks for bearing with us with the technical difficulties as well. Yeah, I think one of the things that you mentioned is how incredibly violent US imperialism is, and how that can be seen across the globe, but including as well with the struggles of your community as well. And being seen as an extinct ethnic group despite being alive and being connected and being present, is also an act of violence and erasure. So thank you for highlighting that too, and just how like the concept of looting as well. I think so many times in the media, looting gets seen as something that communities are doing to fight back, but the real ones who are doing the looting, the kind of looting that can never be repaid, are the capitalists who are extracting the wealth from these communities and extracting and exploiting the land and the people to enrich very few people. And over this pandemic as well, we've seen an increase in billionaires all over the world, which is disgusting. So thank you for highlighting that too. And I think one of the things that stood out to me most from what you said, there was one line that I think sums up this entire event, when you said that fighting for environmental rights is tied to decolonization and anti-colonial resistance. Like in one sentence, you said it. And just the last thing that I wanted to highlight is you touched on neocolonialism in how it shows up as gentrification and how it shows up as well with tourist development, which we see in Honduras as well. Like I grew up on the coast of Honduras, on the coast of the Caribbean, and you see it all the time. And that really is another example of neocolonialism. So and thank you again for highlighting as well the wins that you've had and some of the positives that have come from this ongoing resistance. It's so important to remind ourselves as well that it is an uphill battle, but there are wins for the movement. So thank you for that so much, Pluma. I really appreciate it. And last but certainly not least, we have Jordi. So Jordi is a gender non-conforming, Afrofuturistic, and multi-dimensional artist, weaving healing energy into their work for themselves, but also for others to evolve. They create to heal, they create to express, and they create to be in ceremony. So Jordi, I will pass it to you now.
Bless. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you to all of the panelists for sharing. And thank you to Aron for inviting me to this beautiful space to center connection with the land. I'm thankful to Pluma for naming the thread that connects even me to being here in this space. So I do want to name my mother, Natasha McRae, her mother, Velma Dixon, her mother, Rosalie Richards, her mother, Ola Carroll. I am a Black person. I'm thankful for that word. I'm thankful for my melanin. I'm thankful for Africa. I really resonate with just names and colonial names that were given to land in a way to, again, extract our connection to the land and the tongues that we used to speak to them with. So even as I say Africa, I know there is a deeper word that I wish I knew here, but am wanting to remember here with my heart. I want to talk a little bit about my streams of consciousness. I'm an archivalist and a studier of time, a time traveler. It really aids me to find my footing, to find ground in a highly chaotic, highly violent colony that I was birthed in. There are people in my lineage, people very close to me, people who I see my face and who resonate with being called African American, who resonate with even the word citizen. These words are something that I have grown to really distaste, and it's something to say. I'm really thankful, Adri, you named like no one is illegal on stolen land, and I really do expand that to nationalist identity, specifically those that are stagnant within the illusion of borders, sin fronteras, todos, everywhere, like may they burn and be returned to the earth. And it's a beautiful reminder when I am patient and present with the earth, how little borders mean to it, to the ocean, to the tectonic plates, to magma. They do not exist. So it brings me joy to imagine this world having burned through them, even if my physical body may not be able to witness it. I know they are destroyed because I remember a time in which they weren't, and pray for a time in which they continue to not. I took a journey to the north in 2019. I was invited to do an artist residency there through the Indigenous Arts Program of the Banff Center with the Cree people, Sutana people, Blackfoot people in front of Sleeping Buffalo Mountain. And I was very thankful for the blessing and for the respite, for the rest that I was able to really receive. I was very much navigating in survival mode and really trying to understand myself as an artist, trying to not only survive, but also create and share my stories and share what I've learned, share my process, share my practice. I got there and was able to exhale deeply, just the echoing tiredness that was named on this panel of, simply being in the face of a lot of war and a lot of violence is something that I resonate with. And there, it was a beautiful paradox that was witnessed. It was something that I hadn't experienced before, closeness with people, with humans who had such a deep connection with land that they were born on, land that the people who birthed them were born on. There was a deep connection, an ancestral, generational connection with time and the land that was so beautiful, in spite all of the violences that were still occurring. Kanahus was naming those violences in the north that are continuing to happen. The magic and the alchemy that I witnessed simply by being able to hear in someone's tongue, in someone's words with the land, just describing the mountains and the animals and the trees and the beings there was a privilege, one that I was robbed of. And that was the other side of the paradox, is navigating myself, remembering myself, understanding myself as a displaced Indigenous person, someone who is very much a visitor, someone who is very much looking around and having others look at me as if I'm some invasive species that does not belong here, specifically from humans, specifically from the structure. The land has always held me everywhere that I am. The non-humans especially have reminded me that I belong here, but still there has been this navigating the world as a visitor, and specifically in that space, really trying to find myself and chart myself and follow the thread of how I arrived here and where I even came from. There's a lot of colonial violences, specifically pertaining to the archive, specifically pertaining to information sharing that conveniently destroys or does not allow people to be a part of census. I have not yet charted myself back to the port that my family, that my lineage was brought through. And I think it really has me and my mind going. I know Carla was talking about just the valuing of people, and in this capitalist system, there is, I have to remind myself that there was a time when physical bodies were commodified, were labeled, were price tagged, were branded, were products. As toxic as capitalism is seen, specifically with like land resources, and Pluma was talking about water, and when we think about, you know, a future of this world, like thinking about price tags on water, price tags on air, price tags on trees. Oh, get one of the last 100 trees only for $10,000. You'll be able to breathe in your underground bunker. Like, there are different things that are absurd to me, and I remember how even more absurd and violent things have been, things that I have not witnessed with my eyes, but witnessed with my body. That value was placed on humans, at the same time devalued. And I think of that as it pertains to understanding my relationship with time and being able to access history. And I really haven't. I have been to the land that my grandfather, Arthur Dixon, was born on, land commonly known as Baltimore, Maryland. I have not been to the land that my grandmother was born on and her siblings, land commonly known as Arkansas, Choctaw land. I can touch it in the north. I'm currently in Bulbancha, also known as New Orleans, Choctaw land, 5 hours away from my grandmother's birthplace. And I think of just the way of life that I was separated from, and only 2 generations away. My grandmother remembers the house she was born in. I have no idea the hospital that I was born in. I kind of have an idea. I know the name of it. I don't know what the land looks like outside of it, but there was a deep connection, and I'm thankful that that was echoed, this deep connection that we have with the land, this deep relationship that we have with the land. Carla said, the spirit of the ocean. There are spirits that we commune with that know our names as much as we know theirs. And the alchemy that even takes place of displaced people. My grandmother did not belong on the land that she was birthed from. Belong in a sense of the word, that there were things out of her control that, specifically through colonialism and capitalism, if they did not exist, she would not be on that land. but still there was a deep connection, and I'm trying to follow the thread and retrace the thread. It helps to listen to the people who, again, were birthed on that land, the people who continue to be erased or mythologized, that they do not exist, that they're in history books and they stay there. It's like, no, these people are very much existing. These people are very much a part of a war that has not ended for them. A war that, you know, is ebbing and flowing, a war that is definitely a long-term, a slow boil, a marathon, and not a sprint. These people exist, and the government, specifically this colonial territory called the United States on Turtle Island, keeps us from, and yet there's so much strength in knowing that Mississippi is an indigenous word, to know that these names, these plants, these animals have a deep connection with humans and always have. So I will end and close with this. I am in a constant journey to re-indigenize myself. I don't believe I will arrive at a place. I believe that I am on a path to remember different aspects of my blood connected with many people on different lands. So I am a product of the pilgrimage, the forced displacement of colonialism. To my knowledge, that is the story that that is known commonly. I don't even know my own journey, and that's a part of the remembering and the learning. And I invite everyone, especially those who do not have those deep connections with that land in that way, to find it, specifically those of European descent, specifically those who, you know, have extracted and relied on other people's closeness to the land. I invite you, I implore you to learn of the animals, learn of the spirits who are calling your names. They are calling your names, and you are denying them and going to the South and going and learning from ayahuasca, learning from, you know, these sacred mushrooms, learning from, you know, cannabis. Like, go back to the lands that are calling your name, and heal with them, heal with these places that miss you. So I'll end there, and am thankful for y'all listening. So bless.
Jordi, thank you so much. Those were truly really beautiful words. Yeah, I really appreciate you being so generous with us and sharing this exploration that you've kind of been undergoing, and your vulnerability. So really grateful for that. To me, like, I think you touched on a point at the very beginning on language and the words that we use to describe things, and the words that are used to describe us, and how there's so much history attached to them, and how in so many ways as well, the ways that we refer to the land and the ways that we refer to ourselves are forced upon us through colonialism. And just thinking about displacement from this colonial violence and how that disconnects us from our own languages, our own people, and our own lands. And that really is an injustice that I think is, like, even if you can't name it, I think it's something that is still felt on a molecular level for people who are experiencing that. And truly, we have been robbed. We have been robbed of that experience. And yeah, I think the last point that you ended on how the land is alive, it's living, our life depends on it, and the relationship we have with it depends on that too, and how we need to learn, and as you mentioned, the process of re-indigenizing for yourself, and what that means to you. So thank you again for sharing that with us, and thank you to all of our panelists, to Kanahus, to Carla, to Pluma, and again to Jordi, for sharing your words with us today. For folks who are attendees as well, we'll be opening up the Q&A section now. I've got one question that's broad for folks that I can ask people, for all the panelists, and then I'll open up the Q&A section to see questions from the audience. But one question that I want to ask folks, because is something that was brought up by every single one of you at some point in your your talking points, is the border, and these colonial borders, and the violence of police, the violence of these carceral regimes that have been enforced upon us. So I have a question on that, and it's quite vague, so interpret it however you want. But what do you see as the connection between the abolition of carceral regimes and prisons and police and borders, and how do you think that connects back to issues of environmental justice and land sovereignty? Like, what are the links that you see from your experience? And I know that's a difficult question, but I'll open it up to any of the panelists who'd like to try and answer that and just offer some thoughts initially. I'll put it in the chat as well, so you have a reference.
I'll share something that just came to my head. When you talk about like borders and the structure of borders, I think of, I go back to capitalism, and I go back to the business of borders, like the amount of money and resources that are being funded to create these hard lines. When we think of construction costs, when we think of buying bullets, buying guns, paying for people to be there. Similarly with prisons, there are a lot of resources that are going into these violences. Like, these violences are profitable for people. So when I think of abolition, I think we have to address who's profiting off of these borders being in place, who's profiting on these borders being built, who's profiting on these people being paid to be there in these payrolls, who's profiting on this slave labor, of people being able to make these people like fight fires or build like soccer trophies, or like grow potatoes. Like, there is an industry of violence. So my immediate core response is to identify who's profiting off the industry and ask the earth to swallow them.
Yes. This is me again here. This is a very, very rich conversation. And thank you all for everything that you are putting in the table. The plate now is full, right? About this question, I want to mention first that our language and our way to learn and to understand is different than the language that is like general, that everyone's need to learn in the school or at school, to then exteriorize what they are thinking in the language that others can understand it. Saying this, it's important also to recognize that the Indigenous community and Black communities, they have their own way to treat the problems, all the problems. And everything is start with the education This education is based in our respect to others. One of the biggest problems in the world, the new world, is that we don't respect our ancestors. We don't respect the elders. We don't respect the child. We don't respect nobody because we need to move everybody in the way that we need the people to move with us. So the question is, any connection between the abolition of carceral? Who invent this regimen? This is the first thing to understand, because this is not us. This is not our. So prisons, police, and borders, everything that is mentioned in this question is used to go over us and move us in their way. We don't understand. I don't understand in my language, because we have to learn also English to have the opportunity to tell others what are we thinking and how do we feel. But those words are not part of my culture. So I cannot find a real connection. I understand, of course, but I cannot find a real connection inside when I go inside of my culture. It's very important to understand that if we want to help others, we need to be in love of us. Me, and not as the me that we learn in the school or at college. Not that kind of me that me is everything and everybody has to be under my feet. No, me as a part of the world, part of the mother nature. Jordiana says something very, very important, because we cannot talk about borders if we are people living in the earth. We are residents of the earth, the entire earth. So why can we understand, how can we understand borders? If I commit, if I do something bad against my elderly, against my mom, against my father, I'm going to have the vision or the eye of the entire community over me. And they will tell me every single day, this is not correct. This is our way to work. So when you took a person and put it in prison, for example, the United States have majority in prison, people, Black people and Latinos. So now you are talking about borders, and I'm sorry, I'm extending my response, but you are talking about borders. Every people, every person, even kids that are crossing the border, I'm going to prison. And this is a big business here. So that's why I cannot understand the word. But I will leave this day here, because it's very, very deep. It's very, very big, and we will need maybe one session for each word to understand what are they trying to tell us, because this is a big message. But it is a message for us, prison, police, environment, injustice, environmental injustice is also, everything is a message for us. But because are coming in different language, we don't understand, and we will keep fighting, because my kids, my grandkids, my great-great-grandkids deserve to live in the same land that I born. Thank you.
Pluma and Kanahus, I'm wondering if you folks have some thoughts you'd like to share. If you don't, that's also totally okay. We've got some more questions in line as well, but just wanting to offer some space for you to reflect on this as well, if you'd like to.
Yeah, I think that it's just We know that the government and the colonial system, they built their superpower and they built their prisons and their police and their borders and their control off of the extraction of the resources that build them to the economic power that they have the ability to enforce their laws on us. And it's the wealth that they've accumulated off of the wealth of our lands. We're fighting the whole way that they look at the whole economics. Our economics is a lot different. It's the beautiful relationship we have with the land that is the economics. We'll always, it'll be a reciprocal relationship. Always we give as much or more than we're even taking from the land, our berries, our everything. And if we don't abide by our laws, which means responsibilities to the berries and the animals and the water and everything, if we don't abide by those laws, then there's spiritual repercussions or there's environmental repercussions, like the berries won't come back or such. For them, when you break their laws, the repercussions is their prisons and their police and everything, and it's just so backwards. But they've built their wealth off of our lands. And so how do we build our wealth and our power back from our lands? Thank you.
I can say something. For us in the Caribbean, in Puerto Rico, in Boriken, borders are being, colonialism has traced borders through water, right? Because in Puerto Rico, the native people that live in Puerto Rico, the native indigenous or the Puerto Ricans, there are other people, intercultural. It is built of faith, insularismo. I don't know how to say that, insularismo. What means is that in our land, a way of colonizing is constructing the idea that we are alone floating in the middle of the ocean. That's how it is for us. And that idea is constructed in a way to stop people from uprising, thinking that if we decolonize from US, then we're alone. We will not have that we don't have any other allies, because the media is very practical and y estratégico, imponiendo those politics that the rest of the Caribbean and the rest of Latin America and the rest of the Central or South is bad. It's bad, and people there are maleantes. People there are ladrones, maleantes, asesinos, and that is the political strategy that is constantly present in all our medias in Boriken. So this idea of us floating in the middle of a small island, which is 100 por 100 por 35 millas, it's constructed in a way that we will not have any opportunities to survive if we're not a colony of the US. So what we're doing constantly to break those borders, it's to through education, reivindicating also that we have many allies, and we do have many allies. And as soon as we can decolonize from that territory, we have already alliance that has been constructed with all in communication with the different organizations of different indigenous people and Afro-Indigenas and all these other allies. So it's very interesting because how people only have the way of moving towards the US, because we have US citizen, which it was imposed to us. And I heard what Jordi was saying. We have the US citizen that was imposed to us since we were born. So since we were young, they just put us, oh, you're a US citizen. And that is a crime. That is a terrible crime. Not only a terrible crime that I do not speak my native language, but then I speak Spanish and then I speak English. So I speak both both colony the historical experiences. So it is a constantly violation of the body, also of the body, where and what we're mostly working with also is the mental decolonization too. Mental, from inside out, mental, physical. Is, as we said, we have to clean first the bohío. We have to clean first la casa, and then we clean out the batey. And it's very. Sometimes I think that colonization is the worst crime because it erases or tries to erase everything from generations, language, customs, traditions, economic, political structures. As for instance, in our ancestors' time, through the trueque, through the exchange of our goods and seeds and food, we trade with all over the world. With all the world we trade. We have evidence that we trade with all over the world. So do we have no borders? Our borders were our alliances passing the borders was constructed with the exchange of seeds, of knowledge, and all those things. So what we're working also is vindicating, sorry, that's the right word, vindicating that we are taking back our caminos, we're taking back our borders, we're constructing again those caminos entre los pueblos, entre la gente, between the communities, between the people. We're taking that back no matter how. Each time I'm conspiring in my mind, how can people from Central America come to Puerto Rico? How they can come through the South? It's very strong violation of not being able to move. It's a huge prison. It's a huge prison por toda Yayala, to all las Américas, to todo Occidente, to all the world. And it's so yeah, that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you all so much for those responses. I won't even try to summarize. There was so much there. Thank you all for that. And just taking a look at the time as well, and thinking about the absolute brilliance of work that's happening in this panel, I also want to give the panelists the chance to ask each other questions if you have any questions for others. I know it might not be the most typical way of doing a panel, but I want to give you folks the chance to also direct the conversation. So do you have any questions for any of the other speakers, or any points that you'd like to comment on that they had mentioned? If not, I've got plenty more questions for you, so no pressure if nothing comes up. But if there's something that you want to discuss in more detail, or a question that you had for other speakers, feel free to take it.
I do want to say this conversation is definitely, I love it. It's like getting our hands at the bottom of a lake and flinging up the dense mud there. And I'm thinking a lot about settler colonialism with what's happening across the diaspora, that connection that we are talking about, the things that are happening in Palestine, and really navigating and understanding settler colonialism while within a colony. So really thinking about just like how I've like the dissonance of my my like thought processes. Like I feel like I haven't been taught about these certain things. They've been given to me, and I'll kind of go towards this. I'm thinking of, you know, the other places like Boricua, like Hawaii, like these places that are extensions of this settler colony. If, you know, we extend the conversation of land back, I'm just thinking of how to build solidarity and also destroy. Like, it's like, it's easier to pull back from the limbs, right? If something is like extending, you can like go towards the root, but the root is going to be thick depending on how long it's been growing. You're like, okay, like let's address it. But from the limbs, how can we address it from the limbs? So I think of that specifically with this colony. That's just what's on my mind. Yeah. Food for thought.
Thank you so much for your thoughts, Jordi, as well. I feel like every time you speak, I need like a moment to just think about what you said. Yeah, opening it up to other folks to share any thoughts that they hadn't had the chance to share with us before, and if not, I'll ask some more questions that we've got for you.
I want to share. I want to ask to all of you ladies, gentlemen, souls, spirit, light here in this panel. Do you think that only the decolonization is what's used in the Indigenous and Black communities or populations? What about the media teaching to our kids? What about these new rules to manage the world? What about people telling us what can we going to eat in the next 10 years? No meat, just vegetables. Is this a colonization? What about what is happening in the urbs, in the big cities, when you sell your time to work and they extract from you more than you can do, and also they are paying less of the time that you're selling? What about this slavery way to slaverist way to treat the people who don't have documents inside of each country? Can be Guatemala, can be Spain, can be United States, can be Canada. Do you really think that colonization is especially targeting the Indigenous and Black communities? If you think so, I want to know why.
Yeah, I think that they're targeting us. I feel that even more so because just how colonization has affected us. For example, like my father, he's already passed on. He should have never passed on so fast, like, but the effects that like colonization has had, it affects us differently because like, even though colonization has been around and has affected white people, because if you go back farther, and they say that they were tribal and indigenous to somewhere, they've mutated and morphed so much through colonization that now these people who are affected by colonization, like the white Canadians, for example, their life expectancy can be way high, like 80 years old. For a white Canadian. And meanwhile, for an Indigenous Canadian, it's all the way down at like, 50 years old. So yeah, it affects us differently. And then even to the healthcare system and the colonization with the health and the hospital, yeah, they do target us, I believe, because they don't even give a shit about us. So of course they're just letting us die, letting us have cancers and letting us, all of this stuff. So much different areas of colonization that affects us, even the laws that they impose on us as Indigenous people, the Indian Act, everyone who is, this Indian Act applies to is affected by colonization more than the typical Canadian or whatever, even if there's just so much deep thought to think about, but I do believe it does affect us more, and they are targeting colonization as an act of war upon us. I could talk more, but yeah, that's my 2 bits right now.
And thank you so much for that response, and thank you, Carla, for that question as well. I know that the class ends at 5:50 officially, so we've got a couple of more minutes left. And there was one question that I did want to ask all the panelists before we go. That question, I'll put it in the chat for you right now, is how can people support your work and the movements that you're involved in? How can they stand in solidarity and show up for your demands? So I think that's the final question before things wrap up. And I just want to open it up to the floor for whoever wants to try to answer this question as well.
I can go. I am very thankful to be connected with y'all. Some of y'all I've met for the first time on this panel, so I'm really thankful for this connection when we talk about collective struggle and the illusion of borders. I'm thankful for the paradox and the double-edged sword of even the internet. Like these ethers don't have borders. Like, oh, like borders for everything except for the internet, like, okay, cool. I was just researching about like these underground like pipes that the internet travels along and connects different countries to. I don't know if anybody's like, they're underwater, they're under ocean pipes, and sharks are actually like attacking them. So strange. Was watching a video of this shark that was like trying to nom on this like interweb pipe. So I'm thankful for the internet as it stands as a connection. Yes, earth2jordi.com is where if you subscribe, you can keep in touch. I'm on Instagram until I'm not. Instagram is, again, a double-edged sword of like, wow, violence, but also connection. So I take it with a grain of salt and a spoonful of sugar. And yeah, I think one thing that Carla was talking about the media and about consumption. I was raised in the entertainment industry and very much was like groomed to participate in media in that way, to consume media and believe the stories that were fueled to me. And one thing about creators and creation, someone mentioned children on this in this chat, and I really am thankful for my work as a childcare person, as someone who works with children and creates with and for children, that there is so much creation that happens that is just wanting to be acknowledged and be seen. So I'm thankful for the children in that way and how they create, and thankful for the communities that I'm in of these creators. So yeah, share anything with me that you feel called to, and I'll do the same. Yes.
My organization, our organization, OFRANEH, has a webpage, ofrane.org. The best way to help us is coming into the webpage. It's not in English, I'm so sorry, but there's some articles around you in the internet about what OFRANEH is doing right now. what is the struggle of OFRANEH, what is the fight of OFRANEH and the Garifuna community, and try to learn about that. And if you can also share what you learn with others, we are going to make this collectively thought about justice bigger and bigger. So if we grow as a humanity, as a one, being everyone, we can destroy everything that was imposed to us. So ofrane.org, or you can also follow Miss Miriam Miranda, is the president of OFRANEH, in Twitter. And in Facebook, we have a page named OFRANEH Garifuna. So I invite you to learn with us and to share with us also what you think is a point to address as a Garifuna community. It will be beautiful to know about Kanahus, for example. We already had a link with the people in Puerto Rico or other spiritual communities, because we are land, but we also are spirit. So ofrane.org. Thank you.
Sí. Sí, I would like to share that we have a big project going on over here, and we'll welcome any help on solidarity. We're building a school, the first indigenous political school in Puerto Rico. La primera escuela indígena es de formación política, es formación política para los indígenas. I don't know how to say that, translate that. It's a way of reivindicating o, ¿verdad? O recordando, ¿verdad? La memoria ancestral of who we are, reivindicating our identity as indigenous. And right now we're also in a strong campaña, I don't know to say that, in a strong campaña against ethnical racism and discrimination, because lately we have been very violated, like very directly, and it's becoming more violence. The more that have been touched el tema de racismo, of racism in Puerto Rico, the more people talk about racism, the more they eliminate us. We're also trying to construct alliance with our Afro organizations. It's been very difficult, but we're also trying to control in Puerto Rico. In Puerto Rico, the state, and there are other organizations that are trying to separate the indigenous people from the Afro descendants communities. It's very strong. It's like it keeps repeating the colonial strategies. It's like sometimes you cannot believe it, but it's happening. So what we're doing for this is education. So if you can enter to Facebook Organización CAN, I think I put it in the chat. I will also put the email. If you need any information, I can send you about our proposal on this school. We do have an educational program that we're building, but yes, whatever, if you can spread the word about this school, it will be nice, because we really need help in Puerto Rico. Nobody helps the indigenous. It's very crazy. I also work with other agricultural organizations, and we do get solidarity in different forms, in different ways. But to indigenous, no. It's very bad. Es muy violento eso. So thank you so much. It was a very pleasure, un honor de verdad, poder share with all of you. And I like to point out something, one more thing, and is that there is a war. There is a war against all indigenous and Afro-descendant and all todos los pueblos. There is a war right now. And the only way we can really fight together, it will be spiritual way also, and with our bodies, with our mind, and with all that we have, but all together. There is no other way that we can. So somehow we have come to this moment where we can connect to this media, which is really, it's a really strange media, but somehow it's also strategic that we can hold on. We can hold on and keep communicating all these coyunturas de lucha y coyunturas y, ¿verdad? Y articulaciones de resistencia y guerra. So I'm encouraged to keep holding on y keep retomando los caminos ancestrales, and I know we will make it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you all, and thank you for your words right now. We will win, and we'll continue to fight for our lands and for our freedom. Again, you can find me through Tiny House Warriors, through Instagram or Twitter. You can find me on Kanahus, Kanahus. You'll find me on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, and we're fighting. I'll have a bunch of court cases and trials going on very shortly. There's going to be 3 trials that Tiny House Warriors we're facing for land defense issues. So we're raising funds, and we have a way to donate on tinyhousewarriors.com, and appreciate any funds. Mutual aid is very important, and we depend on that. And we'll give back with our blood, sweat, and tears, and continue to fight. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for taking the time to talk to us today, for sharing your wisdom, for being so generous with your knowledge, and just so generous with your investment in this movement for our collective liberation. It's so hard to wrap up a panel that had so much depth and so much wisdom. And I think, to me, the things that I really want to emphasize to kind of bring this all together is the importance of solidarity across movements, across communities, and making sure that our work and our organizing is centered in the land that we're grounded in, is fueled and supported by the ancestors, and is in a generative process that is reciprocal for future generations as well. So that's a very small attempts to try to summarize the amazing things that were said today. Also just emphasizing that these colonial systems that were imposed on us are fake, they are violent, and we will win. So hoping to leave with a sense of hope and a sense of connection to ourselves, our ancestors, our lands, and also to each other. So again, just want to express my gratitude. If folks want to reach out to me as well, feel free to do that. I also love to stay connected with the panelists to support the work that you're doing. So I will do what I can to follow up on the supports that you've mentioned. So thank you so much again for your time. Truly grateful. It was amazing and such an honor to be in the space with you. And I've learned so much from each and one of you. So thank you so much, folks.